everybody. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today. We have two very special guests, along with, as always, Evan Simonko.
Hello.
And one special guest, we're going to leave it a secret, but the other one is Dr. Suzanne Tinsley.
Who do you think people think right now the guest is?
Probably, I don't know.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Let us know
It's
who you
special, yes. But anyway, Dr. Tinsley is here to talk to us about COVID and the neurological side effects. Can't say that word still.
When you listen to the podcast, you'll find out that Scott cannot say the word
I cannot
neurological.
say that word. Yeah, I know what it means, though. Anyway, she's here to talk to us about COVID and how it affects you in your physical therapy, as well as some wonderful information, stuff I didn't know about.
That's right. She's a medical professional trying to help us to understand the recovery process after COVID and a lot of good information. So we appreciate you tuning in, listening, watching on YouTube. If you are not subscribed, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Every Wednesday, there's a new episode. We appreciate everybody. And leave us a review. It actually helps people to find it and search 5-star review wherever you're listening to this podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, give it a like.
Plus, you get to hear and see us.
That's right.
And who wouldn't want that?
Actually, lots of people. Oh. Well, let's listen to this one because it's a good one.
It is.
I'm back.
There
Scott.
it is. Yeah, the original scream.
Yes. Do you typically do it now?
I try to. It's not good.
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
It's
No,
bad. Yeah.
So, hey,
Justin's back, everybody, and
I am.
welcome.
There's a reason I'm back. We have a
Yes.
special guest.
We have a
Scott.
very, very special guest,
Dr. Suzanne Tinsley from Ochsner, LSU Research. You got a lot of titles in there. So, Dr. Tinsley, tell us who you are, what you do, and we got to get right into it because we got a lot of questions.
Great, thank you. My name is Suzanne Tinsley. I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Institutional Advancement at research.
You like Go Tigers is what you wrote.
Right.
Yeah, one side is, if I'm correct, one side is the school side.
That's where I am.
One side is the hospital side.
Right, and there is a group called Ochsner LSU that work together to run the academic hospital, which is the safety net hospital. But for me, I'm really not part of the Ochsner system other than I am a faculty member administration at LSU-Health Science.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But that helps
We've
for a
already
lot of
learned
people.
something.
Well, yeah, because
I didn't
that's
know that.
part
I'm
of
done.
the community issue that we love to
Right.
do in this is helping people understand what that means. And Ochsner took over. They actually bought in, or they kind of came in because it wasn't always Ochsner. LSU's always been there. So you've worked with them for how many years? Because this is what we were just talking about before we went on air.
Sure. I've been at LSU for 31 years.
Come on.
Wow.
I know.
That's a lot of.
That's a
Anytime you're in
long
education or helping people learn
Absolutely.
for a long
3
time,
decades.
3 decades, that
Absolutely.
deserves a lot of applause.
But I think what I do is the reason I'm here is I'm a physical therapist by profession.
Okay.
I'm board certified in neurologic physical therapy. And so as part of my array of things that I do, I still have the opportunity to practice.
That's awesome.
I'm in our faculty practice clinic working with patients that have had neurological deficits. And it just so happened in the last year that a lot of the patients with COVID that have recovered but have problems, I've had the opportunity to now develop what we call the COVID rehabilitation program, where we're really starting to look at those individuals that have recovered and then now have problems related to their infection and trying to treat that. So that's probably why I'm here,
Yes.
but that's just maybe 1/3 of what my responsibilities are there on campus.
But that's the big part of it.
Absolutely.
Because this is why, again, through this whole pandemic, we've been having special guests in. So I was telling you before we went on air, we're very, very grateful for you.
Thank you.
Anybody that is committed to dedicating their life to helping this community, helping all of the people figure out what's going on and how we can be safe and healthy moving forward. We're deeply indebted. So we're thankful for this as well. All of the service, 30 plus years before pandemic.
Yes, sir.
Doing all that you've done before there. And then now adding this on top, you're a hero to us.
Thank you.
We're very, very thankful. So spread the word over to all of that LSU Health side of things as well. However we can help you, we're here to help too. We would love to be able to do anything we can do to encourage or help on that. And then on the secondary part of it, there are people in the medical field, because you're from the medical field as well, even like we're going through right now, physical therapy, rehabilitation. There's still people on the fence which is shocking to me, that are going, well, I don't know. Tell us why we should believe that it is real. And I say this knowing that you're helping people who are coming out of and recovering from that. Why are they still doubting? I don't know, but give us some evidence today. How many people are you working with? How many people are in rehab? What are you seeing in this rehab?
Well, currently, I probably have about 5 or 6 that I'm currently working with now. And again, I'm getting that group. Initially, I got that group of what we call the long haulers, individuals that had been in the hospital for many days, ICU for many days, on ventilators for many days, that then had issues not only with weakness because of their immobility, being sick in the ICU, but then also cardiovascular issues, pulmonary issues. If we know what the way the virus affects the lungs, then you really have to force those lungs back open, and that is, you have to have an appropriate amount of activity to do that. Yet these individuals that have been in bed for many days have wasted away and have significant weakness, then it's hard to do the activity that allow you then to help your pulmonary control, much less than regaining your strength back. And then there's some issues with some neurological or nerve problems that we're dealing with. And so that's kind of how I got into it, is just being called saying, hey, we know you're the specialist in neurological rehab. These are some issues that, my husband is having, my friend is having, et cetera, et cetera. And so then it kind of progressed into, okay, there are people that have had the virus, that have been tested that have had the virus, that, certainly have antibodies, that is evidence that they had the virus, and now they're having issues that they didn't have before. That is real to me.
Yeah.
And so for me, on my end, my evidence is saying, come look at the people that I'm treating that have recovered from the virus, that they are now what we call the COVID survivor, and let's look at their issues. And these were not issues that they had prior to being infected. So for me, it's a no-brainer. It is real. Now, certainly we recognize that not everybody is going to get it to that extent.
Sure.
I can tell you I had it, and I had it in October and didn't know I had it.
Sure.
All right, and had nothing at all. Mm-hmm. And so I'm the lucky one.
Right.
Okay, but there are many individuals that are not that lucky and are having some major issues.
And you were saying like 1 in 5. Sorry, Scott, just to go back to.
That's just I don't know if that's the appropriate ratio. I'm just saying, there is a ratio out there, or a statistic of all the people that are affected. I think it's less than 10 or 15% require hospitalization, and then certainly at the extent of being in the ICU. I can get you those numbers. I just don't have them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, the only reason I say that, because we all have lunch discussions, because none of us, look, you're not looking at the sharpest tools in the shed right here. All right, everybody knows that listen to this, but where we are challenging ourselves is to look at real data and talk to people who dedicate your life to it. So that when someone comes up, because everyone is experiencing this outside of the medical world. So whether it's your dinner table, whether that's in your workplace or in your church, it's not that big a deal.
It's just the flu.
I got over it. She got over. Where this is why you're so valuable to us. I told Robin, her daughter had gone through and had some serious issues long term, trying to figure out the rehabilitation side of it. Mm-hmm. Well, John Hopkins had on Real Sports on HBO, they had a mini documentary on exactly what you're doing. What is this rehab and the long-term consequences for a certain percentage of people that they don't know because it's still so new. But it was fascinating to me, and I think it helped her and Carly to know, hey, you're not alone, honey.
Absolutely not.
You're athletes, because then they begin to think, because I feel a certain way, I'm crazy. Maybe I am going crazy. I'm like, no. It's very smart people like Dr. Tinsley have given their life and are continuing to give their life to going, we don't understand it, but we're trying to figure that out. So that helps to even hear what you're saying now of what you're doing. So, Scott, I hated to interrupt you, but...
No. I just had a question because you mentioned the neurological.
Neurological,
Yeah,
yes,
sorry,
sir.
I can't say that word. Anyway, I knew about the pulmonary and like the other issues. I didn't know what are some of the neurological
Neurological, got it. It's all right.
neurological problem. Obviously, I'm not that smart.
Certainly there are some instances where the virus itself causes people are related to having a stroke. Okay, but that's not the group I'm working with. I've not actually personally seen someone that has had a cerebral vascular accident or a stroke secondary to COVID. What I am seeing in the clinic is something called a peripheral neuropathy. There is every muscle is innervated by a nerve that your brain controls to make it move. And so what we're seeing is that there are various nerves in the body that become inflamed secondary to that inflammation process of the virus, and that then those nerves do not work appropriately. They have sensory problems and motor problems, and it doesn't follow a pattern. In a sense that what I've primarily seen is things in the lower extremity, legs more than the arms, but it's a process where the muscle doesn't work. It's truly atrophied, and you could say lift your arm all day long, and that nerve isn't going to work. Your brain is sending the signal, the nerve is not working. It's a polyneuropathy that we're seeing, and it's related to inflammation. And if you look in the literature, early on, back in the spring, they initially were calling it Guillain-Barré-like neuropathy, where Guillain-Barré is a disease or a syndrome that is kind of autoimmune. You come into contact, you have a virus, etc., and then your nerves demyelinate. The little rubber around the nerve that makes it fire is not there anymore. And so they were saying that it looks like that early on. What we're seeing in the clinic, and have talked with several of our basic scientists and other physicians, is that we think it is inflammation, but we really don't think it's demyelination because people recover. If you apply the appropriate intervention and the appropriate activity to try to activate that nerve, we've seen recovery in, our average time that we're treating people are about 9 weeks. And with doing some what we call neuromuscular electrical stimulation, trying to fire that nerve, then once they get a little bit of activity back in that muscle, then start putting that muscle into activity, we can get that to come back. And so it certainly is a neuropathy, but I'm not sure it's Guillain-Barré because what I'm seeing in my clinic, it's recovering very quickly if we apply the appropriate intervention. But it's that idea of, people are coming in, they can't raise their arm, or they've got drop foot because the nerve in their leg won't pick up their foot, or they have weakness in their hips. We're seeing a lot that have what we call proximal instability in their hips. They're weak. Their hip flexors, their quads and their legs are weak. And we think it's due to this polyneuropathy that we see after people that have recovered from COVID.
See, what's interesting, so Evan, you'll get into this because the reason we all know the
Guillain-Barré.
Yeah, is Travis Frederick, the center for the Dallas Cowboys, was extreme high-level performing athlete. This is for all the men out there that go, well, you saw him. He had to sit out for a year, worked hard to recover, came back for a year and played at an all-pro level, and then now retired because he was like, I don't think I'll ever be exactly the same, although I have recovered and I was able to perform. They're still lasting. Then that's not COVID related. That's just that side of it.
That's that syndrome and how it occurs.
But in the education part of it, if you want to know another source other than Dr. Tinsley, which she's here, so we're talking about this, the HBO special with John Hopkins is going into specifically young female athletes. There seems to be a higher rate of issues with rehab. There was a college athlete that's a runner. She was in the running program, long distance. She is in a wheelchair after COVID. So the research, and they're going, we don't understand it. So John Hopkins, just like LSU-Health, y'all are all partnering with organizations around the country, because everyone, and the doctor, just like you, that was on the special, like, look, we don't know.
Right.
But that's why this is why research is so important, why that money goes to research and why we invest in that. So talk a little bit about your partnerships with these other hospitals. Have you specifically worked with any larger groups? Are you sharing that data? Because I think Dr. Keith was talking about that's the beauty of right here in Shreveport, Bossier. You're leading the way in some ways, and you're partnering.
Absolutely, and Dr. Keith is the one that's doing most of that collaboration, because we work together in both in the professional component. I let him know I personally have not actually spoken to anybody else up in the East Coast that are doing rehab at this point. But certainly talking with Dr. Scott and what he's doing, and then his collaborations, we're working together and trying to put together a consortium to begin to look at these things a little bit more. But at this point, it's still kind of early on.
Sure. Yeah, that's what's so fascinating to me is with the specific patients that you have, have there been things that you have seen that you go, there are a lot similar, and then there's some that go, well, that's a total standalone. Give us a little bit on that side of that.
Well, I think what has been interesting to me, and there's also a colleague of mine that's working with me, Dr. Marie Vasquez Morgan. What's interesting to us is that nobody looks the same.
Right.
That if you have someone that has had, say, a stroke, there are some components that look similar across. Same way in, say, someone that has Guillain-Barré.
Right.
That we know that it goes more proximal to distal. Distal goes first, then proximal. As you recover proximal and then distal. But with these individuals, though we see neuropathy, in one individual, it's their axillary nerve in their shoulder, and at the same time, they have a peroneal nerve problem in their opposite leg. Well, that doesn't follow a pattern.
Right.
The one thing that I do see consistently is the cardiovascular issues that again, are twofold. One, it could be truly due to the pulmonary issue related to the virus itself, okay, and what that inflammatory process does to the lungs. But a lot of then the cardiovascular issue is just the inability of what happens to you when you lay in a bed for 14 days and don't get out. You get, your conditioning is declines.
You're not running marathons.
Right.
Not good for you.
I feel like I've been preparing for that for a while.
Yes. And so that is consistent, is that these individuals are certainly, their endurance is out the door. They have none. And so then you have to figure out, okay, is their endurance issue, is it pulmonary related primary to the virus, or is it secondary simply because they've just been in bed all for 14 days or 21 days and hadn't done any activity? And so that's it's somewhat consistent across the patients that we're seeing that, but then you have to figure out what is the issue.
Sure.
What about ages? Is it a certain age, or are you seeing all ages?
Actually, I'm seeing mostly middle-aged men and younger.
Yay.
I don't really have a lot of elderly patients yet.
Awesome.
Right. Now, and that's the other thing I was going to say is you were
Sorry about that, guys.
It's okay.
I'm getting there. I don't think I'm middle-aged yet.
I got
What's middle-aged?
anxiety, medication
I
in
think
the
you're
car.
close.
40, huh? What's middle-aged?
No, I think
Dr.
middle age
Tinsley,
is
come
35.
on, we'll come into
I'm
specifics.
33. Call me middle-aged.
No.
Yeah, you're
I'd say mostly the 35, 45, 55,
Okay,
that
a
group.
couple years.
Thank you,
Scott's
Dr.
there.
Tinsley.
I'm there.
They try to
I'm
be
midlife.
younger. I'm the eldest of this group.
But I would say the individual that I've seen that was the most affected was in his mid-30s.
Yay.
It's so strange too. That and now talk from the medical side of your brain. How frustrating is that?
Well, I don't know if it's frustrating. It tells us that to me, I think the medical side, it's fascinating to me, is that, wow, why is it that scientific inquiry of thinking to try to figure out
Sure.
why is that,
Well, the reason I say frustrating is because we don't have, and again, it's all relative, but in less than a year of really, the pandemic's coming up on a year as far as affecting us locally and globally or, nationally. But then in the research side of it, Keith came in early on, Dr. Keith, so we were kind of walking through some of that stuff. And it was, I guess it's probably my personality. When I didn't get or do not get the answers quick enough, I think I would be frustrated.
Absolutely.
Because I'm going, why? I would lay at night probably the way my mind works, like going, okay, now what about, because it's not linear.
Correct.
It is literally all over the map.
board. Absolutely.
So that's why I would say if in your medical mind you experience that, but I do see your side of it as going, well, no, it's fascinating, but I didn't know if it ever got frustrating or, depressing because you're not getting answers quick enough or what you thought, just personally what that vibe would be.
Yeah, I think for me, I hadn't had time
Sure.
to do that, to really think that way, because now I'm trying to figure out how can I, what do I need to do to help individuals recover, and that, I don't really let myself go there.
Sure.
I don't have time to go there.
Yeah, and there are some people that are even in your specific practice. I have some people that I know, and they still don't really believe it. Is it because they're not dealing with helping those people rehab?
It could be. I don't know. I mean, I that certainly could be a hypothesis. I think, if you want to see, come and I'll show you.
That's what
if you want to see, and if you don't believe it, come let me show you. Okay, and then maybe you will. I don't know why people don't. Just because it doesn't affect them.
Right. I think that's what it is.
And it doesn't affect them to the extent that it has affected others.
Sure.
But any part of us is human beings, and being compassionate. If you could come into contact with somebody that has either suffered, someone who has
And
a
that
loss,
would be everybody.
right, or now that having problems after the fact, how can you not but believe that it is?
Sure.
It is here. It's
Because I
evident.
know, for me personally, I was annoyed by the mask. I didn't wear the mask early on. I was frustrated by it. I didn't want to do it. We didn't go out much, but I'd go to the grocery store and I'm not doing this. But it changed when we had an intern whose sister had a heart condition. And when she started coming and working for us this summer, she was openly crying, telling us how the last couple months had been because she's afraid someone's going to kill her sister.
Absolutely.
And
there
so
you
for
go.
me, then it's somebody it's like,
Sure.
okay, I can wear the mask for somebody else.
Yeah.
I'm not really worried I'm going to get it. I ended up getting it, ironically, in September. And that's actually how you got here, is I reached out to you because I still have no smell. So I'm still going into effect. People are worse off. I get that. But I'm like, I really would like to know when I'm going to smell again. 5 months now into it.
Right.
Wow.
And so I know for that person that changed it in my mind of, it's not about me. And as the church,
Sure.
we should be leading that. And I think that is the frustration
Oh,
for
absolutely.
me, that we see Christians and people in the church community that are more worried about our own rights and what we can do versus taking care of our neighbor.
Yeah.
It's
Count your
definitely made-
blessings if you haven't gotten it. Count your blessings. If you got it and you didn't have a bad course of the disease, then you should be grateful.
And I am.
Yeah.
But I would like to smell again one day.
Absolutely.
You don't have any advice from that? There's no research
No,
on that?
For smell, there's really nothing. I mean, we think, that might be nerve related to your olfactory nerve, or it could be other reasons. And, I just, what works in nerves in the periphery, I can get to, but there's no way I can get to that nerve.
I don't want
to
any
help
kind of
it. There you
treatment in
go.
that cranial
There you go.
nerve sticking stuff.
There you go.
That is but that is, again, fascinating.
It is.
And to go back
Fascinating.
along with, I admire you, and I just think about how you're looking at all that and going, wow, what are we going to do, or how are we going to figure this out? Or because that's the other side of it. There's real people, there's real cases. And so how many in this research side of just maybe in the year do you go through, or do you see? How many patients does that involve?
Again, at this point, not really a whole lot,
Right.
because we're just now, not everybody has had that debilitative
Sure.
outcome. And honestly, I think it's because most people don't know that there is something available. And I think that's one of my main reasons for agreeing to come to speak with y'all, is the idea that, one, I think people, if they recovered and they have problems, don't want to be whiny because they recovered.
Sure.
Okay? And I get that.
Sure.
And I think sometimes maybe in the medical profession we're saying, what do you want? You're alive. Okay?
Right.
And I get that. But at some point, we have to say, look, if these are what we're seeing in the literature, that are people are having problems with post-COVID, if this is you, then there is something out there that can be done to help you. Don't just sit at home and say, well, I'm thankful to be alive. I'm not going to be a whiny baby and go, every one of us deserves that quality of life. That's the best that it can be. And so that's kind of the reason I'm here, is I'm hoping that by getting the word out to saying, validate yourself that you have an issue and reach out to somebody. And if the first person says, oh, well, I don't know, well, then reach out to the second person or reach out to the third person until you get to somebody that will believe that, yes, you have an issue. We recognize that. Let's see if we can do something about it.
And I'm thankful that you're doing that, because this is what's awesome about LSU-Health and what you're trying to do is, and this is why we love Dr. Keith, and oftentimes it is overlooked.
Absolutely.
It's just like it's the crisis center, LSU and Ochsner's there, but everybody forgets until you have the crisis.
It's your family member.
And, it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, no, that's where we airlift you. You're not going to Willis-Knighton. You're not going. They're great hospitals, but I'm saying, but there are unique, special things that you guys offer and do that needs to be known. And I'm very thankful for you sharing the stories and telling us, because it is our goal too. That number one, we know it's real. Mm-hmm. Number two, we're doing everything we can and have for the past year. Human, we make mistakes and we fall short. So you may catch me at Home Depot and I'm like, oh, where's my mind? I'm putting it up. But we are doing everything we can to say it's real. We're going to try to do our best to stop the spread. We're going to try to let you know what is going on and how to get the help, and then try to encourage and strengthen the people that are dedicating and giving their life to solving that problem. That's why the Hospital Hope this past week, you're trying to feed all these, just encourage them or give them something to go, you're tired. We're all tired, but the medical profession and the research can't get tired.
Right.
We want to keep encouraging you. We want to keep going. We believe in you. Right. So it is discouraging. Hey, it's not real. I'm like, that's what I've told many people. Well, come with me to go to the COVID wing over at Willis-Knighton North. I'll tell y'all. They're like, well, no, I'm not. Then be quiet.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I get sinful. You know what I'm saying? Right. I get real flesh. Well, then shut up. Come on, go over here. If you don't care, take off all your stuff and let's roll on through and go visit people. Because, a nurse friend of mine had a family member that was very sick. And so she knew that I had been up there. She's like, would you go see him? Of course I would. Well, when I walked into the hall, all the nurses, their head turned around like I was a stranger, because most people, they said, thank you for coming, because no one wants to come up here. For good reason.
Absolutely.
There are protocols, there are things in place, but I told them it's okay. At that point, I'd only had half the vaccine. But at this other point, I was like, I'll put on every PPE, whatever I got to do to be able to let that love. They weren't sure they were going to make it, and they wanted a minister to see them. That's it would be the least that I could do, however I can do it. But I'm very small. We're like, people go, it ain't brave of me. The nurses, the doctors, the staff. I'm like, no, you're the ones that are really doing it. So that's why I'm very, very thankful for all of that aspect of it.
Real quick to go back before we move on from that. If somebody did need to reach out or get in contact or talk to somebody about that, do you have a place you would recommend to send them if they have family members or they're experiencing?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I would tell you to reach out to any physical therapist that, in our community. If they want to come, we actually have a program where we're trying to actually collect some data and look at people early on. I would be happy to see them. Or some other therapists in our faculty practice clinic, and I can certainly give you numbers to call, my name, and we could get them set up. I mean, I want people to have access.
Sure.
Okay? And so reach out to me. I'd be happy to work with you, or any of our clinicians are. If you're not in this area and someplace else, I can give you some names in, say Ruston or Monroe that I would recommend that would probably do I know would do a good job. I mean, it's the idea of, over time, I think people will eventually get better, but why do we have to wait 6 or 9 months if there's something we can do?
Yes.
You know, as a physical therapist, I am into movement and activity. That's what we do, you know, the human experience. And so it's the idea of we all deserve a good quality of life. I mean,
Sure.
that's just what we deserve.
I
And
agree.
so if there's a way that we can facilitate that in a faster time frame, then that's what I want to do. So, you know, from the pulmonary issues, you know, eventually over time he probably would get better. But why are we waiting 9 months when we
Sure.
could do some stuff now that would facilitate that quicker?
Yeah, like Christy Rose at our office, she's one of our girls that works here. She's a singer. She helps in finance. She does a lot around the office. She went to her doctor today. Wasn't it today?
Yeah,
She
yes, this morning.
She had COVID, still has pulmonary issues, still working through all this. And this has been a long road. She was in the hospital for 2 weeks.
Yep.
Right.
You know,
She's in her 30s.
And she's in her 30s. And so this is why, you know, she would feel like, I don't know. And that's why people don't understand is the statistics don't, thank God, are small enough that that's still a danger, though. It's like, well, not everybody's Christy. Most of them got better.
Most of them got
And
better.
so I'm like, yeah, but Christy, I always tell people,
Right.
she's in our office, y'all. Go
Yes.
talk to Christy how hard it is to still walk upstairs when that wasn't a problem before.
Now,
And
is
she's
she
healthy.
is Christy involved in any activity that's trying to help her with that?
She went to the pulmonologist today, so I would not want to speak
Okay.
on behalf
There you
of
go.
what
Good.
she is doing
All right.
in her rehab or what her doctor is doing. But this is why speaking with you today is important. It's another avenue, just like you're saying, like, hey, go talk to Dr. Tinsley. Find out what they're doing and see if there's another avenue to continue to help you recover.
So if you're listening to that, we're going to put it in the show notes. So if you
Yes.
would like to get in touch with you, we'll get that
Absolutely.
information, put that on
put a
there, and
little
you can
link
talk
to
to
that.
somebody.
That's somebody that is directly in our office who went
Absolutely.
through it, that is
Right.
continuing to have issues that may not fully be aware of what you offer or what's going on, or her doctor didn't, or her, you know.
And the only reason I knew is because we asked Keith Scott.
Yeah.
that I
Right.
found you through that, and he referred
Absolutely.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying as we're going through those things, it's a big deal.
My point is reach out, tell somebody. Don't just sit on it. If you have issues, tell somebody. Ask about it.
In that, what would be an issue that they should look for? So say whoever, they've had COVID, they recovered somewhat, but they haven't told anybody. It's kind of like he was worried about smell. But what would be other things that someone may look for to go, oh, that's not normal? Or, oh, that is something I should maybe go talk to somebody else about? Is there anything that you would tell them?
The two things that I'm mostly focused on are the weakness issues
Okay.
that then lead into functional decline.
Okay.
The not being able to get back to the activity that you were doing prior to COVID. And is it because you're weak? Is it because you have certain body parts that don't move? Like,
Sure.
oh, well, you know, my foot, I keep dragging my foot. You know, I had one individual, a lady say, well, you know, I have noticed that I can't wear high heel shoes anymore, that my ankles don't feel stable. And sure enough, come to find out she had some issues related to one of the muscles in her leg that was related to COVID, that was part of this polyneuropathy that needed some intervention. And she didn't really recognize that her foot was weak until we tested, and she was like, well, that's why I can't wear high heel shoes. Absolutely, that's why you can't wear high heel shoes. And so a little bit of intervention, in about 3 weeks, we had it back to where, you know, she's back in her high heel shoes and her ankle is stable. She doesn't feel like it's going to roll. You know, she's going to sprain it. And so it's just that little thing. And it was not enough for her to think, well, you know, maybe it is related to COVID. It isn't. You know, we kind of pulled it out of her. Well, have you ever had anybody check to see, look at your strength in your lower legs and make sure that it's even? And sure enough, that one particular muscle was extremely weak.
See, that's what's interesting. And that is fascinating there. So those are a weakness. Because Dr. Keith, now again, I'm not throwing his business out there. He would tell me the same thing. Is when I'd call him, he was just like, well, that was something that was surprising. He goes, man, I've kind of lost some of my feeling. I'm kind of,
Right.
and I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, we don't know, Justin. It's like, I'm a doctor. I'm a medical doctor. I work with, but we're still researching and find that. So that is fascinating.
Right. So weakness that is not, that seems not typical. Okay. Also changes in sensation, like Dr. Scott,
Yeah.
in that, you know, all of a sudden he feels and then the next day he doesn't, and then he feels and then he doesn't, or weakness that comes and go. Well, I felt strong yesterday, today I feel weak. So anything related to sensation, weakness, or your inability to do the things that you were able to do prior to COVID. Now, if you didn't, run a marathon before COVID, I'm not going to make you run a marathon after. But if you could climb a flight of stairs and now you can't, that's an issue.
Yeah.
If you can't get out of a chair, that's an issue.
That's a good point.
What about sciatica? Is there any COVID-related issues with that? Because my sciatica's been acting up.
You haven't had COVID, Scott.
That I know of. I'm just asking.
Yes, you do. Now, hold on a second. You do know you don't have it because we gave blood.
We gave blood, and I didn't have antibodies, but we don't know how long the antibodies were.
Well, that's true. We don't know.
Which, speaking of blood, so maybe you can answer this question, maybe you can't, but there is a lot of talk that blood type, it predestines you to, affects you differently.
There is. And I'm not real versed in that literature. I've read some of it. I will tell you that I'm O positive.
Me too.
And I didn't know it when I had it. Okay, and that's the...
So everybody said we wouldn't get it. So that you're already letting me know. No, see?
They didn't say we wouldn't get it.
They said it wouldn't affect us as
we
bad.
wouldn't have as serious about.
What about A positive?
I can't.
Don't get Dr. Tinsley to lie.
That didn't sound promising.
I know AB negative is the worst one.
Don't get her to lie. This is a medical professional.
Right.
It's just nice to have someone on here that just doesn't throw stuff out.
Yeah,
You're gonna
you're
speak
not throwing
from
it to
stuff.
the wall.
No. I am not a hematologist. I am not a hematologist.
I would just ask about my sciatica, though.
You're just throwing it out there. You have the chance.
Well,
I'm not. Sciatica is normally a musculoskeletal mechanical issue, and so I can certainly refer you to one of our orthopedic specialists.
See, there you go.
That could help you with sciatica. Well, you wouldn't have numbness in your hands because of sciatica.
Well, I'm having numbness in my leg and my hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your hands are probably I know the exact person that I could refer you to help you.
Hold on a second. Is this do we need a copay right now? Because what is happening here? Is this
It's going to be like an Ask Dr. Tinsley call-in show.
If I had the opportunity, why not take it?
I think we're going to do a call-in. Let's go ahead and call
like Dr. Oz.
Yeah,
we're going to do this weekly. There you go.
This is
one.
What's your problem? Where can I refer you?
I figured I have the opportunity. I'm going to ask.
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
I understand.
Right.
What else do you have? Because I was going. There's one thing. Well, let me go. Evan, think of your question. I got one thing. All right. So you're not a hematologist, but in the hospital system, we keep hearing there's a shortage of blood. Do you know anything about? Because we're trying to encourage people. If you're well and you can, you need to do that. Mm-hmm. Because it shows support. It shows concern. But do you know anything about that right now? We're trying to push for more people to do it. So if somebody's listening right now, I'm just reminding them.
Just the same as I think anybody's heard. Dr. Ghali, who is our Chancellor, wonderful, fantastic, has been sending out Chancellor's memos just saying, listen, if any of the faculty, the staff that you can enable, please go and give blood. We actually set up a couple of times over the last week with all the weather there to come to the campus to give blood and then to go to LifeShare. It's just a shortage, and I don't know if it's related to just maybe not enough people giving blood as normally in the past.
Sure.
Or maybe we've had a greater need for blood due to surgeries and those types of things. So, it is a shortage.
I'm just making sure, just from a medical professional, not just us saying, hey, go get blood.
No, it is a shortage.
You need to do it.
Yes.
So ahead.
Absolutely. So I think this is a question a lot of people have, and you are probably not an expert to answer this, and I'm not going to put you on the spot if you don't want to answer it. But what do you see in the next coming months and year? Does it look like the projection of what you're hearing or people you're talking to until there is a sense of normal? Or are we never going back to normal?
I don't think normal is going to be normal the way we knew normal before. I think it's going to be a new normal. Again, I'm not an expert in that component. All right, so I would highly recommend y'all get Dr. John Van Cherry, who is kind of our guy that's running the both the COVID study and he's in charge of the vaccination group at the fairgrounds and then also at Chevy Land. He could probably be more astute along those lines and tell us what where we're going. What I've heard is that, we have to get people vaccinated. And once we get then that large group vaccinated, however long that that takes. I think we've done a great job here in Shreveport. And again, under Dr. Vancheri and Dr. Ghali's leadership, working within the area hospitals here, trying to roll out. If you've not been to the fairgrounds and seen, 6 lines of cars going and people getting vaccinated, it's really phenomenal. A nurse named Shelley Riley is kind of in charge of all that, and she's done a great job. What I understand is once that we get a large group vaccinated, then that's where we can maybe begin to start then thinking bringing groups back together. Now, how fast that will be, I don't know. I know that there's a couple of big activities that we're having at LSU-Health as part of our academic, the school, with the match day for our 4th-year medical students with graduation, and we are going to hold those events, but they're going to be held with the proper distancing.
Yep.
Like match day, I think, is going to be at the 262, the David Toms complex outside, and then you'll have individual tables where everybody will be spread out, and looking at maybe having some events in the fall, but again where we're spread and social distance. So, I think eventually we'll get there. Time frame, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons. It's a good point because we're almost out of time already, aren't we?
It's flying.
Yeah, going by. But this is because Easter's around the corner for us. It'll be the first time that we're moving back towards gathering, and people still question why we. This is so funny to me. Like, why are you still saying we have to do, or that you're choosing to do, A protocol or B protocol? For us, we're doing a health screening. We're just asking people. We want that when you come in. There's a couple of reasons. One, we want to communicate you if something happens. We want to make sure you know that, hey, people in that pod were affected, so that you can go take measures necessary to keep your family safe. Mask. We do social distance. We have all of these things that we're putting into place. And as you say, correct me if I'm wrong, that's all we have at this point.
Right.
If you're trying to do it, it's not that we're just trying to be difficult. It is inconvenient. It is challenging. But if you want to have any kind of a gathering, because that connection and that encouragement still is valuable, for example, your graduation or whatever, you're just trying to go, how can I do this the safest possible way?
We still want to do it,
Yep.
but how can we do it with the least impact?
Right.
I mean, I would hate to think that I held an event at my house where I had more than 6 people in my home, and someone came that didn't know that they had COVID and gave it to somebody else, and that person passed away. I would hate to have that on my heart.
Sure.
That I didn't do what I needed to do to ensure, or the best that I could to make sure that next person doesn't get infected and then therefore doesn't have the possibility of having that bad outcome.
And I think that's the part that people don't understand is we're almost a year into this, and people are tired. People are whatever. Numbers are going down, which is a praise the Lord all across the country. I mean, you do see that it is. There are still variants and some things going on, but it looks like we're moving in the right direction. More people are getting vaccinated than ever.
Just reading about the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine that they're trying to add another one.
So I think all of those things are positive, but I guess what I'm saying is the only reason we're putting all of these protocols in place, and we continue to do it, and the reason we waited when others didn't, was simply because we're trying to think of the other person more than ourselves.
Absolutely.
And we will continue to do that. And that's why we know, and we want to communicate to you, we appreciate what all of y'all are doing in the medical profession to be able to help us understand that and understand the value of why all of those protocols are necessary, even in the near future. But then also that you're there for us when we get it. If we get it, and how do you continue to recover? Because not everybody looks the same.
Not everybody looks the same, and don't think just because your issue is small, it's not important.
Yep.
It is important.
Yep.
And so reach out and let's see, what we can do, how we can get you back to where you were, the best quality of life you can have.
That's good.
It is. And I just think about the value, too, of meeting in person and not being isolated. And you hear about depression and substance abuse, and that's what we're trying to figure out as a church, where that line is.
Oh, my goodness, right.
And it is complicated. Well, we already know that. That's why it's so complicated.
Addiction is on the rise.
It is. And it's because, obviously, we've never been here before. So you're isolated and you're pulling away and you don't know what to do. And the effects on children and school, everybody's trying to figure that out. I think that's the part that I go back and like, do you really think we just want to complicate your life to complicate your
Right.
life? It's like, no, we're trying to find a way to keep you as healthy as possible so that you're not in the rehab trying to figure out how do I get my feeling back in my hands or walk to
Hospitalized,
yeah,
yeah.
hospital. So that's where we appreciate all that. And you taking the time to help us understand that is very valuable to us. We're very thankful.
I'll just, if I have a moment,
Sure.
there's on our LSU-Health Science campus, Shreveport campus, there are several centers of excellence. And I'm sure you've heard about the EVT lab, which is the Emerging Viral Threat Lab that is done. That's a center that's done all the sequencing and does all the testing.
That's where, isn't Keith somehow he pointed to?
He's a part of that,
Yeah.
correct. But then you think I'm part of the Center for Brain Health, which is a center of excellence looking at neurologically. And that's kind of where now we've kind of centered this COVID rehab is part of that Center for Brain Health. We also have a center on campus that is called the Louisiana Addiction Research Center. And so where I'm looking at the recovery side from a neurological standpoint, you have the EVT lab that's looking at the sequencing, seeing how many people can be tested. Now you have the LARC, which is another center of excellence run by Dr. Patterson is the clinical side, Dr. Nick Getters is the basic science side, that they're looking now at then the addiction component related to it. And so I would tell you that in April they're putting on a summit. It's kind of a suicide summit looking at just the effects of COVID.
Sure.
and those numbers going up. Suicide, addiction, methamphetamine, alcohol, cocaine, narcotic, all of those are on the rise. And how do we deal with that? And so certainly, I'm glad you had me here looking at it from the brain health, the neuro rehab side. You had Dr. Scott looking at it from the medical side, and now we have another portion of our health science center that's looking at it from the addiction side.
We need to bring them in. We'll call them. We're going to get them.
Yeah, we're gonna get 'em.
I can give you some names.
Because it's great.
really-
And that's why I just thank God for Dr. Keith. I mean, he's one a dear friend, but he really was in that you would agree to it because you didn't really know what you're walking into. This is kind of a dicey group, though, Dr. Tinsley.
Some random guy called you about smell.
Yeah,
and
you're like,
here you on a
what?
podcast.
Yeah, but our heart is to encourage you, to thank you, and to support
Thank
what
you.
you guys do
Yes.
because it's valuable. It's very, very valuable. So it means the world to us that you've given 30 plus years to it, and then to now be going into stuff that we just don't know a lot about. It means something though that you're giving life to that, energy to that, your life to that. So we're just very, very grateful. Absolutely nothing else.
I always think, when people ask you, why do you do what you do? Why do you, because I work with those people that have had tremendous deficits.
Sure.
And so I always think back to, my little verse I go to in 2 Corinthians that talks about meeting the needs of God's people.
That's awesome.
And I think about, I've not been there, but I'm sure that if people have been there that have said, how am I ever going to do this? And have said a prayer, God, please
Yeah.
help me. And for me to be a part of that, what I do, it's not miraculous. I tell people all the time, what I do is not rocket science, but it does serve a purpose. And so, again, how can we help people get back to what their quality of life is?
We
what it
think
needs to be.
we think it is a miracle. You're a
Well,
miracle.
I don't know about that. But
And rocket science, there ain't no doubt. I always mix up. Is it brain? I always
Rocket
go, it's not-
surgery.
I always go, it's not brain science, and they're like, well, it's rocket science and brain
Surgery.
surgery.
Yeah.
Yes.
it's just listening to
surgery.
people. What are their issues? Truly listening, and then validating everybody.
Well, we want you to keep working with Scott.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm gonna need a lot of help.
especially now that we know you're a brain specialist. We really would like to look.
There's a
into-
lot.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And when
going
I'm done with you, then we'll have to head on over to the LARC. Is that what it is?
The LARC, Louisiana Addiction Research Center.
Yeah.
Definitely have to get in on that.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Let's make the rounds. There
Hey,
you go.
Dr. Tinsley, thank you for
You're
giving
welcome.
us your time
Absolutely.
today.
Thank you so
are
much.
a gift to this community.
Thank
More
you.
people need to know about what y'all do, so thank you for spending
Thank
time
you
with
so
us
I
today.
enjoyed it. Thank you for asking me.
All
You're
right.
welcome.
You'll come back?
Absolutely.
All right, good.
Anytime.
All right, we'll do it. Thank you for
Next
listening.
week. I'm kidding.
Hey, listen, thanks for listening to the podcast. Thanks for being a part of it. You got questions, remember, go to the notes.
Show
we'll
notes.
put all the
Absolutely.
I'll even get Evan all the information on that HBO documentary.
Yeah.
So it's another great research thing on rehabbing and helping you understand why we're still so adamant about the procedures and the things we have in place, and why we're so grateful for the medical professionals in our area that are giving their life to helping us figure it out. All right, thanks for listening.
Peace.
Till next time. Peace, my friends.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to that. We hope it was helpful. And again, make sure you check out the show notes if you or a family member, somebody you know, needs recovery or is having issues after COVID. Dr. Tinsley's graciously offered to help you to get placed and find what you need to do that. So make sure you take advantage of that. Check it out. And Scott, we all learned something today, I think.
Yeah, we did. And once again, I just want to reiterate that don't be like, I'm going to make it. I'm going to power through
Tough it out.
Yeah, if you need help, reach out. Even if you can't reach out to them, reach out to us, and we'll help make the connection. Because you shouldn't do life alone.
That's right. And if you can help with Scott's issues, let us know too. We can help you.
Actually, I'm going tomorrow. See a chiropractor.
There you go. Well, on that note, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe and check out the new episode next week.
I'm looking forward to it.
The chiropractor or the...
Both.